Graphic design? Can you make a living at that?
Three, two, one, fun, 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 fun.
Welcome to Design Futures, a show about what happens after design school. I'm Chris St. Cyr, and my guest on this episode is Deb Levison. How are you?
I'm good.
Look
How
at
are
that
you?
big smile. Oh my God. Deb is a senior digital designer at Maark, a Boston-based digital transformation agency where she works on projects for clients such as John Hancock and Akamai. Deb has also worked for State Street Global Advisors, So Limited, and Corey McPherson Nash. She earned a BA in art history from Suffolk University and is a 2012 graduate of the Ringling College of Art and Design. I haven't seen you, well, I've seen you since Ringling, but it's been a while.
Yeah, I think last time I saw you was at Corey, and that must have been like 2013, 2014.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, I can't stay away from Boston. I have to go back to Boston once in a while, and you were there. But you're not in Boston now. You are
In Clarksburg, Maryland,
you're moving to
New York City.
New York City.
Mhm.
But that's not where Maark is. Is that correct?
No, Maark's in Boston. Maark's in, to be precise, they're in Charlestown, Massachusetts. Yeah, I work remotely for them. Still pretty new there. Being onboarded remotely is interesting.
Have you been into the office?
No, I moved to Maryland. I was working for So Limited because I moved here November of 2020. And then I started Maark in March. So I haven't been in an office since March of 2020. I don't think I'll be going into an office anytime soon.
And so you're all set up though to work remotely for the foreseeable future for Maark, like in New York City or wherever else you move to.
I mean, they have people all over. I mean, just in the design team, we have about 8 people, and there's a girl in Portugal. There's a few people like around New England, New Hampshire, around Boston. There's 2 people from Brazil. So it's pretty, it's good. I mean, now with remote work, I feel like you just open up your possibilities to getting great designers anywhere as opposed to just getting great designers in your town.
Yeah.
For a company, I feel like, I mean, if I had a company, I would definitely be open to remote work for my team.
There was an article, I mean, there's all kinds of articles being written this past year about remote work, but there was one in particular I remember that was the key point, was that companies should be open to this because then they get the best talent, right? Talent wants to live wherever they want to live, but they can just work there and work remotely, and the company's better for it.
I really think that. I think it was hard in the beginning when I was still at So to work remotely. I actually didn't like it at all because I wasn't used to it. But I mean, there are challenges like brainstorms and, you know, stuff. There are certain things that are better in person, but I feel like the benefits like outweigh that.
So what was the like turning point for you where, you know, you didn't like it, but then was there some technology, some interaction, or was there something that changed?
It was getting a routine, because at first I was very like scatterbrained. I would start work sometimes at like 7 a.m. and then sometimes it wasn't until 10 a.m. And I was just like, I couldn't get a routine down. And once I got a routine down and I wasn't on my computer all night or like starting work really early for no reason, I started seeing the benefit of like no commute, like not having to deal with the subway super crowded, being able to, I mean, honestly, being able to like ignore Slack sometimes when people are slacking me and just be like, I'm busy, instead of people like coming over all the time. Like you can actually have like focus time. Yeah, now I just feel like I'm much more productive not having, the commute was just the worst.
Yeah.
But just having like time at home to focus. I think the challenge is not stopping, like not, you know, 5 o'clock hits sometimes at the office and you're like, okay, bye. But at home, it's harder to put the computer down.
Yeah. It's almost like you have to schedule that part too.
Yeah.
So you were talking about Slack. There's been a number of people I've talked to, and they've quite a few people are using Slack. Is that a tool you use a lot, and that's how you stay connected?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what are the other tools you use?
Slack is the one most for communication. The other tools, like for design, I've been using Figma. Now at Maark pretty much 100% of the time. It's just easy for file share, and it's easy for, people can have access to it, and they actually use it in a way, like I didn't see the potential of Figma before. I kind of used it for like brainstorming and sketching, and it was easy for everybody to be in one place and just put stickies on the Figma board and start brainstorming. But creating components and having like things that are automated, Figma is just great for automation, and the design process can go so much faster than I was doing it. So it's a little bit of a learning curve, but I definitely really, really love Figma.
Yeah, that's the thing I keep hearing from designers, that do similar thing that you're doing, UX, UI, interactive. Rarely do they use any of the Adobe products, unless you're, I guess, like traditional print designer.
I know, but I remember making websites on Illustrator or Photoshop, and you had to have your layers like very clearly labeled, and everything had to be in the perfect order for every single page.
I know. I'm so glad we're beyond that. That era of web design. Did you use Flash? I mean, we did some Flash back in the Ringling days.
I did a whole semester of Flash at Ringling. I've never opened it since.
No, you didn't use it when you got out?
Maybe at Corey at some point, but no, it was After Effects.
Yeah.
It's crazy because I still pay for Adobe. I should really not be paying for it right now. But it's like, as a designer, I can't not have Adobe on my computer. That just feels wrong. I feel like I want to keep InDesign just to not forget all the stuff that I learned at Ringling, especially during like the Time Life book days.
Oh, the Time Life book. Yeah, tell us about the Time Life book. I didn't teach any of that class. Was that a senior or junior year project?
I think it was a junior year.
But it was all encompassing. It was like, was it all semester long, or?
It felt like all semester long. I think it was.
It might have been.
Yeah. I mean, I still have my Time Life somewhere.
Oh, I keep seeing them whenever I look up, Ringling students from my days there. I see their portfolios on LinkedIn and other places. The Time Life book is one of the student projects that it's still around. There's a bunch of other things that have gone away, but that one still is on portfolio websites.
One of those projects that I always think like, oh, I could just redo this just for the practice of paragraph styles, character styles, like all those InDesign things that I haven't done in like a few years, except for updating my resume.
What was your Time Life subject?
Desert.
A desert?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
I purposely picked that one because at the time I thought it was so cool to have a super minimal book and have it. I put on all these like, I would so change that today. I used all these like Photoshop textures of like grain and I wanted it to look like it had been through the desert.
Sure, lots of sand or cracked earth, kind of
sand and tan colors and like random camels that didn't really have anything to do with the text.
But wasn't there an infographic component? Did everybody have to have like some kind of data displayed? It had a lot to it. I do remember when, as faculty, we would use that project to kind of assess maybe the whole junior year or the whole program. You can see all the different parts of a curriculum in that one project. Yeah,
I remember getting the book in the mail, or like ordering the book from Blurb or something.
Right.
And like being so excited to get it in the mail and see also terrified to see the finished product. There's got to be a typo in there somewhere.
Oh, sure. I'm sure. Yeah, there's always at least one like that's ruined your whole semester, finding that one typo in your Blurb book. Nobody else would probably ever see it except for you. Yeah, I know. When you spend that much time on that project, you probably know all the details, so you could find all the mistakes in it. We all have those projects, even our professional work.
I used to, at Corey, we did a lot of, because their main client, their main industry that they worked in was education. So a lot of it was like view books and stuff like that. And there was always view books there was Belmont Hill School and Buckingham Brown and Nickel School, which are two like major prep schools in Boston. And I remember going on a press run and just like being terrified that something was going to go wrong. There was some layer that I didn't do like 4-color process, or that I left as a BMS, whatever it's called, color, the Pantone color, and that I like something was gonna go wrong. Like that's the one thing that I don't miss about the print process, actually.
The stress of the press checks.
Yeah.
So what's the equivalent in your job now? Like, is there like when you design something, it goes off the developers? Do you have like that sense of anxiety?
A little,
Yeah.
but it's not really, because we do a QA process after. That's what I'm doing. Like that's what I did all last week, and it wasn't even a design that I created, but just doing, creating tickets for bugs that I'm sure developers don't love seeing when I say the line height here is not exactly like the original design, guys.
Oh, that sounds like a great one for a developer. Like,
They're like,
yeah.
who cares?
Exactly. They're like, you people are obsessing over type argument, space between your type, way too much,
And then they're like, okay, well, this take 3 extra hours. That's going to change all these other styles that are based on this one. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. So in your like day to day, when say you have a project, like what are you doing on a day by day basis as a senior digital designer? And then you kind of take us through kind of the life cycle of a project.
We basically start with the strategy phase. I've always, because I worked at Corey, always like valued the strategy phase as much as the design phase, if not more. Sometimes I think that if the project doesn't have, a big idea behind it, there's no legs to really stand on. So designers are sometimes included in that. If not, we kind of get the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah.
Depending on time.
We should be involved in the strategy.
Right? I think so too.
Yeah.
Because I would much rather hear it from the client, what they're looking for, and also hear not what the opportunities are that they may not even see. So if you're not in the kickoff meeting as a designer, you sometimes don't really know exactly how far you can push them. And then we'll have the internal kickoff with the whole team, project management, sometimes development will be involved. And we'll strategize on what's the best approach for the project. And then you'll usually try to present 3 distinct directions. One that's usually pretty close to what the client wants, one that hopefully is very out of their comfort zone, and then one that's kind of down the middle, has a mix of both. Because in past experiences, they'll kind of, if you just present one that's super conservative and one that's super out there, they'll kind of Frankenstein one that's kind of middle ground. So just present them a middle ground one that's our preference, and then go from there. And there's usually one designer on a project. So it's always basically me and the creative director. And outside of, these team meetings with the full project, he and I have done brainstorms, just the both of us. We'll get on Slack or on Zoom and sketch things really quickly, put a timer on for 10 minutes and be like, okay, sketch out, 10 minutes worth of a homepage design, super rough, pen to paper, and then take a picture of it, show it on Slack, present it, and then there'll be ideas from both that we can put together into one direction and just go from there.
So you're just taking a photo. You said you just like sketching the paper on your desk and taking a photo and uploading to Slack.
The new version of brainstorming.
Yeah, right. So at any point, are you using like a wireframe UI kit?
Yeah, we'll present wireframes. It'll be from Figma.
Yeah. Okay.
We presented a few wireframes to a client that were very high fidelity sometimes.
Yeah.
And it can be very hit or miss, I've noticed, and not just at Maark, at other places as well. It's confusing sometimes to certain clients where they're like, is this what this looks like? It's very designed, but it's all gray and black. So I've tried to lately do not even putting in like lorem ipsum, just putting lines, gray boxes, and that's it. That's all you get. Yeah, I mean, I've spent like a week on a full wireframe that was very high fidelity, presented to the client, and they said they don't get it. And the feedback was it wasn't even objective. It was so subjective about something that's not designed, but it looked very designed.
Right.
That 10 minutes later, I did a wireframe that was the gray boxes, and it took 5 minutes to create. And they're like, oh yeah, this is exactly what we're looking for. I was like,
I just spent a whole week. Yeah, could have done that in half a day instead of a whole week. I want to take a look at some of the projects on your website. So this one is probably maybe the oldest one we'll look at. So this is when you were at Corey McPherson
Corey.
Nash.
It is an older project, but it's definitely my favorite project in my portfolio. Hubbub. Every year there's a Boston Book Festival, and 2015 they wanted to create a festival that was dedicated to kids only, and they needed branding for it. So Corey, we came up with the name, the word mark, the characters. My big role in the project was the character development for the
These
animal.
characters.
Yeah, but it was actually it was a really fun project because it just illustration's so fun. The whole project was really fun. It was for, Boston Book Festival is, I think, a nonprofit. So it was nice to be doing something for the city of Boston. It was a challenging project because we started off, I believe, with monsters that we wanted to create, funny, nice monsters. And they had like a lot of personality. Like one had a top hat, the other one had like something else. And they all had these like backstories. But we presented it, and BBF felt like they might be a little too scary for the younger kids. So then we tried farm animals, and those felt a little too juvenile for like the preteens that are too cool for farm animals.
Oh yeah.
And then we went through this more graphic approach of creating these animals that come from the shapes of the Hubbub logo. They don't have as much personality as the monsters we had initially, but it was really cool to see them like on buses, on subways. It was the first time that I had seen one of my branding projects like out in the real world.
That's always fun,
Yeah, it was just like you saw that big, huge poster that's like 2 stories high on the public library with a giant lion that you created.
Right. The engine looks cool, looks interesting. I don't know what it is, but that's why I wanted to ask you, because there was this graphic here. What does all this mean?
That's kind of the logic for the back end of the system. So yeah, the engine is the VC branch of MIT. They try to work with companies that are trying to solve the world's biggest problems, and they're building this office near MIT, and they have this huge screen. I mean, it's massive. That's going to be viewed from outside as well. They wanted something that would show people outside and inside what Tough Tech is, like what the engine is doing, who they're helping, the companies that are working with them. And then the companies that are working at the engine offices, they wanted to keep the screen fresh and have it always have new content and be exciting. So this was going to this was a schematic actually design. This isn't what the final design was going to look like. I had left SoSo by the time that the final design was going to be created. Yeah. But this was a kind of schematic design of what we were envisioning for the screen, just to give the engine kind of a taste of this is the look and feel that the energy that we want this to have.
And it would display data, like data visualization.
Yeah, it would display like Tough Tech by numbers, like what they're doing in Tough Tech, what Tough Tech actually is. And then it would go through and talk about the different verticals that the engine works in. So, advanced systems, I think, and technology and human health and disease and all these different things that they were gonna, that they work in, and then show stats. Like if there was a, hashtag advanced systems, it could show up in a pop-up in the screen. If there were, it could go through the different companies each one by one and talk about what they're doing. So the point was to have every time somebody walks by throughout the day, they can see something new and learn something new about the engine. I work with this illustrator that I follow on Instagram. He's like a random, he does, I think he's called Bogasm is his thing. He does like posters, one poster every single day. And I started following him, and he does their branding. So he has this like look and feel of very abstract kind of lines. His stuff
looks techie for sure.
Yeah.
And then this one
was also a schematic. I mean, I think it ended up being kind of what they're gonna do. So Museum of San Diego, they have a museum in downtown San Diego, I believe, and then they were opening a new one in La Jolla. And the La Jolla one was going to have this brand new lobby, and they wanted the screen above it to be interactive. And So had done the screen for Museum of Fine Arts of Boston. So MCSD was actually a client of So already. So had done this MCSD React, that's the fourth screen down. And it's an exhibit within the museum where you can, all the paintings have QR codes. And so you can scan your phone and then react to the painting. So like create, some kind of tweet about it. You can take a photo with it, and then people can interact with React in their app. And it's kind of a you interacting with the artwork and other visitors in the museum. So it was probably the easiest presentation of my life because we had to go through this whole storyboard. And for the first presentation, we had, this screen's going to be here for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. We had all mapped out, and we kind of had like a very complicated presentation to tell the story of these screens. And I didn't have to say a word because she was like, oh, I get it. Like, this is moving this way. You're changing the colors as you move. I totally understand. I was like, oh, okay. My job here is over.
Great. Just have the client give the presentation.
Pretty much. But yeah, the point of it was always going to be moving. So you can't really see it on these screens, but the title for like upcoming exhibit and the event tomorrow night, those are going to kind of slide in and out. So there are these different angled shapes were going to always be animated. So the screen wasn't like stagnant, and it was all based on their X in their logo.
I like this one because it's a different kind of project than what we typically think of in school, like those kind of screen-based projects. And I remember, actually, I was in the Boston area. I was in Boston visiting friends, and I don't drink Dunkin' Donuts, but I had to go there to get something for somebody. And I was looking at their screen like, wow, that's actually kind of cool. There was like stuff behind the counter, on the screen, and it was moving and it was engaging. I mean, Dunkin' Donuts has a strong brand, colors and type and everything. And I just took notice of it that day. And I remember making a note of it. It's like, oh, I got to work something like this into a student project.
Those are the kind of projects that I wish were in school.
Yeah, we need to do more of those for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so last one, Akamai, which this is at your old company, but you're working with this Akamai at your new company.
Yeah, very different project.
Yeah, this is for the whole building's lobby design.
Yeah, they were opening a new headquarters in Cambridge, and we were working on the digital signage for it. I mean, So had done that chandelier that's above it, and that chandelier actually is controlled by this screen, one of the screens on this table on the left.
Wow.
Which we designed. You can it shows you web traffic, and then it changes color, and then it shows you threats in the web, and then it changes color into showing where the threats are. Because that chandelier is actually a map of the world. Akamai is 16 floors, so I feel like we did 30 screens, maybe more. We did almost all the digital signage on all 16 floors. Mm-hmm. And the big thing was the lobby, obviously, because it's actually public space and anybody can go in. And yeah, that's the screen here. This first one is how to control the chandelier, and it tells you what the chandelier is and all that. And then behind it is a timeline table that's 4 screens. And so it can have people here on one side and then people interacting on the other, and they won't like disrupt each other's experiences. But it's a timeline of basically Akamai's whole history.
So are you designing this timeline interface? And
yeah. And testing it too. I mean, So was very big because all their pieces were so interactive. They were very big on prototyping. Mm-hmm. So we used to have a kind of workshop in the back of the office that had screens that were kind of like this size, that you could actually, interact with them and touch them and see how it actually looked. Because it's one thing to see it on your computer and try to scale it to the size and kind of see how it feels like. And it's another thing to actually be in front of the table and play around with it, because it changes a lot of how you're going to go about designing it.
With something like this, would you bring in people to test on it, or was it just people at the company testing on it? Would you set up like a focus group kind of user testing scenarios?
I don't think that we did that for Akamai. Definitely would have been helpful. But we tested it ourselves,
Right.
and we did a lot of on-site testing too. And we did not do a focus group. I feel like we should have. I mean, there were also 20 other screens and floors above that weren't for public view that needed to be designed. I mean, Soso was is still a small studio. So for that Akamai project, I think it was one of the bigger projects that they'd had. So literally every single person in the studio was on Akamai at one point.
It seems like you're only working on digital, right? So you sort of evolved into that. And so was there a transitional point for you where you decided you're going to focus on UI, UX and not like print or branding?
I feel like I'm still honestly trying to find my focus.
Yeah.
At Corey, because a lot of their clients were education, it was a lot of print in the end, especially. And I did want to learn about more digital work. I didn't want to be working only in print. I made the jump to State Street where I was senior digital designer, but it was still a lot of print because, financial people always need print. I feel like it was probably at State Street where I was like, okay, I need to make a total complete change and go all digital, and then maybe hopefully have some print clients, because I do love print work, have some freelance print clients
Right.
in my spare time, just to like keep that side of myself alive.
So now you're working in you're a senior digital designer. That's your title?
Yeah.
And you've been out of school for 9 years?
10 years.
Yeah, almost 10 years. Can you let us know what your range of salary is at this point in your career? Because it's different than when you start off, right?
Oh yeah, it's different. Yeah. I'm in the 100K plus range.
Okay. And so how big is Maark? What's your structure like? Do you have you mentioned a creative director or design director, right?
There's a creative director, there's a design team manager who until recently was a creative director. So I think they did a little restructuring, but I think it's about 80 people worldwide now. It's not huge. It's definitely growing. I think they want to probably grow the design team. I mean, there's definitely enough work to go around.
And there's room for you to move up. So would your move up be like art director level or something in there?
Okay. Yeah, and I always struggle with that because I've been senior designer, honestly, for a long time. I've been senior designer since Corey. I left Corey in 2017. I've been senior designer since then. I could probably, maybe should be art director by now, but I think that in certain places, I struggle with not designing as much if I'm art director. Like the higher up I go, the less design I'm going to do, the more delegation I'm going to just have to take on. I don't know if that's really for me. I don't know that like working with proposals and scope and budgets, I would rather do the design work. But I know that if I want to move up, I need to make my peace with the fact that I need to do more of it.
You just think of the ideas, right? Just at that level, it's all about the big ideas and some paperwork and some managing people, right? So the other thing we talked about recently was the whole UX degree, master's degree, certificate. Are you planning on doing more of that?
Yes. Last time we talked, I was pursuing an MPS degree at MICA. I actually, after I started Maark, I kind of realized that I could learn a lot of that on the job and save myself like $20,000. It was a hard decision though. It wasn't like, I felt like a little awkward about having to withdraw from a program. But I'm fortunate enough that, the creative director at Maark knew that. And I told him that I was struggling with the decision to maybe not continue. And he's like, we can make goals for you here where you can be exposed to UX. You can do journey maps. You can do real user interviews. And, we'll teach you that stuff on the job, which I'm like, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. Right. And they'll pay also for, other courses like Coursera and stuff like that and Treehouse. And I won't have the master's degree to show, but I think that I'll learn just as much.
Yeah. You probably would.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many resources now. And I told him, I was like, I want to learn on the job. Like, that's so awesome. But the stakes are also much higher when you're working with an actual client project.
Right.
There's hours being billed and you're trying to learn at the same time, as opposed to like some hypothetical project that you're creating at school where,
Yeah.
you know, I work well under pressure. So,
Oh, that's good. Speaking of working under pressure, at school, there was no pressure there, right? College.
not at all.
So I can't remember what class.
I thought it was freshman. I think it was
It might have been
color and image.
freshman. Yeah, it might have been freshman or sophomore. So that's where our paths crossed. You were in Boston before that. That's where you were getting your art history degree. So, like, what was your path? So you're originally from Brazil? Is that
Mhm.
right? And then so take it from, did you go to high school in Brazil or
Yeah.
have art classes and then
Yeah.
come to the States? So tell us the early history of Deb and her creative adventures.
Yeah, I mean, I went to high school in Brazil and I went to the American school there. You get 3 diplomas. You get American diploma, Brazilian diploma, which I automatically would get. And then there was this program called IB, which would give you a diploma to go to Europe if you wanted to for college. And there were certain programs or classes you could take IB like high level, and I took art. And that's kind of where my like passion for art started, because I started skipping all my other classes to go to the art studio. Like I couldn't tell
Nice.
you what happened in math or chemistry. um, and
Look at you now, though. I think that's fine.
it turned out
Those teachers
okay.
will forgive you. Yeah.
But yeah, I knew from like a very early age. I didn't know that I wanted to be in the arts, but I knew that what I didn't want to do. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. I knew I didn't want to be like a lawyer. And in Brazil, at least when I was growing up, those were the options, was like lawyer, doctor, engineer. The closest thing to being in the arts was being in advertising. Staying in Brazil for college really wasn't, I didn't even think about it because I didn't even know of an art school in Brazil. I'm sure that there are, I just didn't know about them. So then I did this IB program. I did really well in it.
And IB is
International Baccalaureate.
Okay, that right.
And it's tough. Like it's not an easy program. Part of the IB high level art program was you had to have the sketchbook, and every few weeks or every other week you had to research artists and you had to write about artists. And I really enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed actually creating the art. And I graduated thinking I want to become either a curator or an art critic. And so when I went to Suffolk, I started as a journalism minor and an art history major. And then I dropped journalism because I was like, I don't want to be an art critic, actually.
No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I really loved art history. It was a small team, a small class that graduated. I think there was other like 5 students that graduated with me. It was a class, honestly, that everybody skipped.
Except for you.
Unless you were a major, everybody skipped it. Like economics people did not care about going to Northern Renaissance art class. But I loved it. I loved art history. I still love art history. Every time I go into a museum, I'm like, oh, should I have continued art history and tried to become a curator? But then I look at like the amount of schooling that would take.
Yeah. You'd have your PhD by now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. And I graduated Suffolk, and even though I really liked studying about artists, I felt probably in my like middle of junior year, I actually missed creating something. And I knew that I didn't want to necessarily become a starving artist, like a lot of the artists that I was reading about.
Right.
I wanted to be able to make a living. But I had never, before I got to Ringling, like I had never opened Photoshop. Like I was not one of those people that played around with Photoshop. So when I graduated Suffolk in 2008, economy wasn't great and I couldn't find a job as a recent art history grad. So I moved back home, which happened to be Sarasota, where my parents were at the time. They moved from Brazil. And they were like, you can't just stay like putzing here at home. Like you got to do something.
Go back to college.
Yeah, they were like, go take like an adult education class at Ringling. And I'm like, what's Ringling? So I took,
Is that the circus?
Yeah, exactly. That was
That's
my
what everybody else says.
question. I took a class like Intro to Photoshop, and I really enjoyed it. I took it with Saturday mornings. I really enjoyed it, and I enrolled in Ringling, and then it just like took off.
Yeah. So,
And I had done a lot of the classes from the first semester of freshman year. So I actually started Ringling in January of 09.
so you had a few years on your classmates,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit,
That was interesting.
a little maturity more than your classmates. So what was that like?
There were certain things that like I had already been to college and like
Right.
done the partying thing.
Oh yeah,
I'm
I'm
like,
going. It's 9 o'clock. I'm going home and go to bed.
exactly. I was like, I don't need to do the house party thing anymore. Like I've been there, done that. I was in Boston. There's house parties like everywhere you go. So I was past that phase, but I feel like had I started Ringling in 2004 when I first went to college, I would not have done very well because I don't think I was mature enough to have the drive and like the concentration that it requires to go to art school, because art school was honestly like harder than any job I've ever had.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
It should be. I mean, we know how challenging it is to be a designer, to be an artist, to be
Yeah.
a creative person, and to make a living at it, right? So
Mhm.
it should be challenging. So you really know what to expect when you get out.
It was a great experience. Like I've got a really good foundation for especially like work ethic from Ringling.
What did you enjoy about Ringling?
I definitely enjoyed the courses and the teachers. It was kind of like you did have a curriculum where you had to follow things, but it was kind of choose your own adventure of how your project was going to go. Like it was so different from art history where you're learning about creative people, but you're not necessarily being creative yourself. Like your essays have to be pretty cookie cutter, exactly like everybody else's to get a good grade. Well, at art school, it's like you can do really what you want and take away from it what you want. Like you can slack off and not do anything, or you can put like everything into it and then come out with a great project that you're proud of and that you still have in your portfolio to this day sometimes. And it was fun. Like it was tiring. It was a lot of work, but it was just fun. It was, yeah, it was, I miss Ringling.
So you've had almost 10 years you've been out, and things have changed. I mean, like the design field keeps changing. So is there anything from your education at Ringling that you feel connects with what you do now? Is there anything there, or is it you've learned all new things that you're applying?
I think the basic principles of design have always come from Ringling. And I think, that I wouldn't have gotten that at work necessarily. It would have been a very hard learning curve for me to have to learn about good typography, color theory, and a lot of stuff that I also learned in art history too.
Mhm.
I just wasn't putting into practice at that point. But knowing what it takes to create good design came from Ringling. I think the more practical things you can learn on the job. I don't think it's necessarily something you should be learning in school. Like
Right.
the more like theoretical things that really help the creative process, I learned from school. There are certain things that I wish I had learned at school that
So that was my next question. What do we need how do we need to change design education? Is there anything that you wish
I think
you knew back then?
I think maybe I did just say I'm going to contradict myself because some of the practical things that I learned on the job maybe could have been something that I learned in senior year. I had never been in an office before, so just like office etiquette was
How to
new.
write an email successfully? Yeah.
Yeah, how to write an email, like what is professional, what's not. I mean, I learned through internships too, but I feel like sometimes in senior portfolio, if it was a little more formalized where we go into that critique and we're really presenting as if they are really the client or the art creative directors, it would have been so scary as a student, but I think it would have really prepared for meetings in the future, because that kind of thing you can learn on the job, but it can take a very long time to
Yeah.
actually perfect it. I mean, I'm still perfecting my presentation skills to clients.
All right, let's wrap up with the pop quiz.
Oh God,
Did
no.
you practice?
No.
Practice all your answers? Okay, so let's start with this. I don't know if it's an easy one or not. UX or UI?
UX.
Work beverage.
Coffee.
After work beverage?
Coffee.
Coffee? Yeah, how can you sleep at night if you have coffee after work?
Half calf.
Half calf. Okay. sketchbook, blank or gridded?
Gridded. No, not gridded. Sorry, the dotted one.
Yeah, I consider that gridded because it's sort
Okay,
of- yeah,
gridded.
it's on a grid. I like that one too. Which genre of music do you listen to while you're designing?
I've been listening to the Spotify like Focus. If not, it's like gangster hip hop,
Gangster hip hop. Wow.
gangster rap. Depends on what you're designing.
Yeah, I mean, if you need to focus, I don't know. If
But it's the
gangster,
Focus one.
how do you back up your files?
I'll confess I've not backed up my files in anything besides Dropbox
Okay,
in a long time. And I forgot my Dropbox password, so I
better
don't
recover
have
that.
access to a lot of my files.
Okay, last question: Boston, New York City, or Sarasota?
Boston.
Yeah, Boston. Boston wins.
Eventually, I know I'll just go back there.
Oh, you do. Oh, all right. Last, you get the last word. Any final thoughts?
I would say that. Okay, I'm going to say something that's going to crush the students' dreams. That crushed my dreams in the beginning was that you're, as a designer, you're going to have to compromise a lot. And that's just a fact. Know it now, deal with it, and your life is going to be so much easier. No, I think that, please edit that out. That's going to be so bad.
I'm going to leave that in. Compromise is an important part of business, right?
It's an important part of business, but as a designer, like sometimes it slowly kills your soul. Work on projects that you believe in, and you're not necessarily always going to agree with your client or agree with your creative director, but there's always going to, like, there will always be that one project that will make you like so happy to be a designer. And those are the projects that you should really focus on and really put everything that you have into, because they don't come around that much.
That's great. Yeah. It was so good to see and hear you, Deb. We'll meet up in New York sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. This was so much fun. I've never been on a podcast before.
Oh yeah. I'm sure it's the first of many.
Oh God.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
So what did we learn from Deb? Get a routine, especially if you work remotely. Also, have fun in design school with your projects. As she said, choose your own adventure. Thanks to Deb Levison of Maark, that's Maark with 2 A's, for joining me on the podcast. If you have any comments or questions for me or any of the guests, please leave them in the comments. And subscribe so you can catch the next episode of Design Futures. Until next time, go learn something. Your future depends on it. Thanks for listening. See ya.